Now I invite you to take out your copy of God's Word. Look with me at the 95th Psalm. Psalm 95. 95th. Let's read the first portion of that together. Psalm 95. I'll read the first 6. You'll have a little less than that on the screen if you're looking at that. But here's what the psalmist writes by God's Spirit in Psalm 95. Oh, come, let us worship, or sing, rather, to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Let us come into His presence with thanksgiving. Let us make a joyful noise to Him with songs of praise. For the Lord is a great God and a great King above all gods. In His hand are the depths of the earth. The heights of the mountains are His also. The sea is His, for He made it, and His hands formed the dry land. O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord, our Maker. For He is our God, the 7th verse says, and we are the people of His pasture and the sheep of His hand. It is no secret that as those who spend time in God's Word, as those who gather on a Sunday morning like this, it is no secret that if we are to be anything, it is that we are to be a people of gratitude, a people who come to worship and declare the goodness, the worthiness. We appreciate the reading and the songs this morning. Worthy art thou. You are worthy of everything that we can put together and somehow declare in thanks and praise to God. Gratitude is an essential for us as God's people. It is not the icing on the cake. It is not for the ministers and the elders and those super Christians, if that's such a thing. I'm not sure it is. It is an essential part of life with Jesus. I'm mindful of Colossians chapter 1 when the Apostle Paul shares his prayer for their spiritual growth. If he were writing a letter to us in Elk City, I'm not sure what we'd call the letter for sure. We'll talk about that at another occasion. But I wonder, what would he include? And it seems that gratitude is an essential for spiritual growth. And that doesn't mean that it's that later growth. It's that if you're going to grow and be what you need to be as a Christian. Notice in that passage in Colossians 1, he says, I want you to have knowledge that increases, to be strengthened. And then as you do all of that, as you're growing in what you know about Jesus and you're growing in your actual relationship with Him, knowing Him and being known by Him, you do all of that with thanks. Giving thanks, he says, to the Father who's qualified us to have this inheritance that we share with the saints. Gratitude is an essential for the Christian. And if you're someone that may not be a Christian, but you're interested in God and Jesus, and what does it mean to become a Christian, you might consider how gratitude already fits into the picture. Unfortunately, there are some barriers to gratitude. I think of it like a port. There are things in our lives that come in to our hearts that try to blockade gratitude from being in our hearts and then thankfulness and expressions of thanks coming back out. Some barriers. And yet, as we consider those this morning, I also hope that we will see some help to break through those barriers or to break the blockade on our heart so that we can become a more grateful people, a more grateful Christian today. Gratitude in these areas These are the areas where the barriers occur, but also then where we have to find ways to break through. Our hearts. And I know we're not describing this organ that pumps blood that's usually on the left side of our chest, but if you want to think about it in a physical way this morning, you might think about here, and then mind here, and then the mouth. For some reason, all of us, we know where our mouth is. I don't know what that's about, but we tend to not have a lot of trouble with the mouth part of our anatomy. But I'm thinking about the heart as, this morning, the seat of who we are. You could also think of words like soul or being, the seat of our emotions and our very essence. It's heart. And then our mind, I'm thinking of more the intellect and our processing, the thinking mind. And then again, the mouth, well, I'm using mine right now, and so you don't have to go think very deeply on that one. Those three areas for barriers, but also for help in my gratitude. Gratitude, then, in our hearts. There are two image search engines that I tend to use for preparing PowerPoints for sermons. They allow access to either images that are not copyrighted or the option to purchase some, which I do occasionally, that are copyrighted, but then you're able to purchase and use them. You don't have to worry about copyright or watermarks and all of that. I don't want to make too much of this, but I did find it interesting. And I don't know that I'd noticed this before. I'm sure I probably have searched for this word before, and I don't know if I just hadn't noticed it or what. But one particular engine that I use first, search engine, you put in the word humility, and it does not register. It wants to know, and I had to go back and double and triple check my spelling, because it wanted to know, did you mean humidity? Humidity, not humility. Now, I didn't want to talk about humidity today, so no, I did not mean humidity. But it could not, it was like there was not a place for humility. And I don't know if that's a commentary in itself on our world and how we see humility versus ambition and drive. Now, then I went to my second one that I mainly use. It did give me a few options, a few images. Most of them I had to purchase for some reason. But they were almost all of them, think about this, were religious in nature. Almost all of them were people with hands folded in prayer or someone bowing down in worship. So there's either not a place for it, or there is, but it's only associated with religion, with God. Because, I say all that because the number one barrier to gratitude in my heart, in my very being, is that very little word, ego. Ego. Arrogance. Pride. The idea that I have to be the one. The idea that everything in my life is about what I earn, what I deserve then. And yet gratitude is all about the opposite of that, of those. It's about what I'm being given, what I have been given. Is there anything that is more opposite to gratitude and thanks than ego? You might put it this way. If you're filling out the handout, that word there is destroys. A sense of entitlement destroys us. It destroys our gratitude. It destroys us. Our spiritual health, our health in general. Ego is so incredibly detrimental to, let's just say, our health. And for sure, our gratitude. What are those questions that are raised in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7? Would you turn there with me? If you're in Psalm 95, let's make our way to 1 Corinthians chapter 4. In a context about the danger of being puffed up against our fellow Christians even, of thinking a little too highly of ourselves, of being a little too full of our own ideas and our own agendas and our own personal center, our selfish focus. We're asked these questions as Christians. For who sees anything different? This is 1 Corinthians 4, verse 7, in you. If we were writing this today, we might say, who made you special? What is it that we sometimes ask people? Who died and made you king or queen, right? You ever asked your kiddos that? What's different about you? And then the second question, what do you have that you did not receive? But it's easy to look through life with that entitled lens, isn't it? I'm just after what's mine. I have a right to this. I've done all of this. I've made all this possible. I did the work. I put in the time. I went to school. I got my degree. I went to the interview, and my resume got me the job. I got the promotion. I did all of this. Look at the nice house and the nice car. Look at what I have. And then you wonder who you're talking to when you say that. Are you saying, look at what I have, look at what I have done, God? When I say you, I mean us. What do you have you haven't received? And then he says this, if then you received it, and when you really think about it, everything I have, I received. I didn't really do this. I might have used the resources and the opportunities given me, but at the end of the day, everything I have in my life, I receive. From God at the really end of the story, and then God working through people and things in my life. If you then received it, why do you boast as if you did not receive it? Entitlement destroys us. It'll destroy our gratitude. It will destroy our marriages. It will destroy us. In Daniel chapter 4, is that on the screen? It's not on the screen. I hope it is now. It's on my screen here at least. We read of a king. He was warned, and then it happened. One day he looks out over his kingdom, and he begins to have those conversations we have with ourselves, and he says, is this not great Babylon? That's his kingdom. By my power. I've done this. And I've created this royal residence for my majesty. And here's what happens. Sooner or later, my heart will be humbled. If I don't find a way to humble myself and realize what I have in the blessings and in the gifts I have. I'm not saying it's going to be as dramatic and as direct as Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 4. He spends 7 years on his hands and knees like a beast in the field, and then he comes to himself. He humbles himself by being humbled by God. And then he praises God. There's 2 ways to help this barrier. One is to look at yourself a little more, to truly see who you are. Come to grips with your own sin. Come to face with your own mortality. your own weaknesses. And that has its place. But the other way may be even more effective, and that is to focus on God. There's my smallness and my sin, and then there is His greatness and grandeur. And I don't know personally of a better way to find humility in my heart than going back and back to the cross. Scott read from Romans 5 and Romans 3 already. We could go to Romans 8:32, where the question there is, if God gave His Son, how will He not through Jesus give us freely all things? Let it sink in. Or Romans 6, in a discussion about being baptized and buried into the death of Jesus, into Jesus, and raised up. He says, thanks be to God that we were slaves to sin and now have been set free. If I'm in Jesus this morning, I'd better let it sink in. There's a whole list of blessings, but there's something extra to see what I have in Jesus. My heart. A heart of gratitude based in humility. But then right with that, our mind. Our mind. Don't raise your hand too quickly on this one. Anybody in here busy? Anybody? Anybody busy? Not right now, okay, in your life. Anybody busy? Really? Nobody? It's a part of who we are. I don't know if we say it's an American thing, it's a Western thing. I don't know what it is. And some of you didn't raise your hand. We may have to have a sermon on something else later. But our calendars stay full, don't they? There's always something going on. And it becomes the pat response. How are you doing? You might say, I'm doing well, just what? Busy. Busy. And we find ourselves, if we're not very careful, without even realizing it, going through life distracted. Distraction might be the number one barrier to our minds for gratitude. We're like Martha in Luke 10 when Jesus says, Martha, Martha, you're anxious, you're worried about so many different things. But there's one thing, it's a matter of focus. It's really important. Everything is urgent in our lives. Everything has to be taken care of right now. And really, it's what I'm taking care of right now, I'm already on to the next thing if I'm not careful there. Someone put it this way, that the moment, being alive in the moment, in the present, becomes this small crack between what we've done and what we're about to do. And we don't slow down enough. Because of how busy and distracted we are, we might not even have time to give thought, to be thankful. Because of our distraction, we become fretful and forgetful. And I don't say that to be trite, but it's right, isn't it? Do you remember Joseph when Joseph is in prison and he helps the cupbearer and he says, just do one thing for me, one thing. Don't forget about me. When you're back in Pharaoh's graces, it's in Genesis 41 if you want to jot it down. It's not in the notes. And it takes 2 years. Joseph stays in prison 2 years. And then something cues the cupbearer's memory, and he remembers Joseph. I don't know how well I fare at that myself. It's easy to look at the cupbearer and think, man, you just had one person, one thing to remember. How many times do I find myself realizing days, weeks, months have passed, and I never even said thank you, much less sent a thank you card or even a text. Or in Luke 17, Jesus heals the lepers, and one of them comes back and worships at Jesus' feet. Jesus says, where are the other 9? Weren't there 10 lepers healed? What did the cupbearer do? What did the 9 healed lepers do? They went on their way. We might say in our words, they got busy with their new life and just forgot gratitude. What's the answer? Barrier in my mind, distraction. The answer, we might use 2 words, is observation. Stop. To see. I'll tell you what I did. I was contemplating this sermon as I was driving earlier last week. And it was after, I guess it was Thursday, after the bad weather and some of the storms and rain. And I'm going to Walmart. I'm busy. And I noticed the sunset. It had that different hue of orange, and there may have been some smoke still mixed in, but at least some gray thunderclouds still there, but it was really beautiful. And so I went to take a picture. And I even had the thought, I might use that in my sermon Sunday as a picture of God's beauty to stop and notice. And I didn't take the picture. Now, the lesson is not that it's wrong to take pictures of a sunset or of your life. But when was the last time we stopped and appreciated something in God's creation, just seeing it? Just enjoying the taste. And if you're like me, that cup of coffee this morning tasted even better for some reason. The taste. The breeze. As much as we may complain about the wind in Oklahoma, it's breeze on our face. The sun's light meeting our gaze. How many different ways can I stop and take note of the blessings and the beauties of my world? This is not about ignoring brokenness and bad things in our world. It is about observation, seeing, and then noticing. Reception, then, is when I do that, and this takes time. If you're too busy, it doesn't work. And then reception is receiving God's gifts. Because when we're not busy with something, what do? We fill the void with music and podcast and some kind of screen time. And again, the lesson is not, don't listen to music or podcasts. The lesson is to stop and give thanks to God. Let me not forget His benefits, Psalm 103 says. Romans 14:6 is the person who enjoys and the person who abstains for their own personal reasons. Whether I choose to do this or I don't choose to do this, in both cases, I give thanks to God. My mind in gratitude. Now here's the last one. My mouth. Oh, by the way, I forgot to show you this. And I said I was going to do this. You see this one. And they're not the same person and it's not a story. But I thought, what if what happened there leads to this. Now, she's supposed to be mindful there, okay? She's not lonely because he left her because they were both on their phones. But I did think about that as I put this together. You could make something out of that in the story if you wanted to. But have you ever heard a bird complain? Now, I know the answer is that's how they were made and instincts and all that, but have you ever heard a bird whine? Somebody in here is going to come to me after the sermon and say, I'm the guy, I've heard it. And this isn't about cats. Y'all know I'm a cat guy. So, but which one of these am I? Which one are you? Because when it comes to gratitude with our mouth, we do one of two things. We feel what comes out with complaining and whining, or with praise to God and thanks to God or to others or for the blessings in our lives. And our hearts and our lips are not ever really neutral. There's not really a time when I'm not grateful, but I'm not complaining. I'm just somewhere in between. I don't know how that works, or if that works. What if we intentionally said, I'm going to take a small step today to say more words of thanks and a few less words of complaint? And I should probably put that on the screen for you. All right. Well, there was the complaining. There's the solution. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, Psalm 107:2 says. David says, God's going to be pleased in Psalm 69, not with an oxen that I give. He'll be even more pleased if I sing my thanks. Have you noticed that we associate whining and complaining and being critical with children? Somebody's whining and you say, you're being like a child. You're being childish. Well, maybe part of it is if we taught our children to be thankful and not complainers, we might have a few less adults that whine and complain. But I look at my world, and there's plenty of both, aren't there? You don't have to go far. You don't have to look long to find something to complain about and grumble over. Somebody pulled out in front of me. Somebody took too long bringing my order to the table. Somebody talks too much. Somebody doesn't talk much. But isn't the very same true of things, blessings to count? And I'm not trying to just make a psychological trick out of this, but it works. What if I was so busy saying thank you to God and beyond that I didn't have time to complain? Gratitude with our mouth. We've seen this morning gratitude in three different areas: heart, mind, I guess I should say heart, mind, and mouth. Sometimes we may treat gratitude like prayer and some other things. We wait until we're desperate. Now, we were not always the best at being thankful when we're desperate, but sometimes we get in trouble and we think, oh, maybe I should say thank you to God, some prayers, and write some cards, and then maybe things will change. That's not how gratitude's meant to work. It's meant to come from adoration of God, admiration of His goodness, and out of real feeling of appreciation for what He's done for us. But it's a lot like exercise, progressive overload. I'm not going to walk out today and say, okay, Gantt preached the sermon on gratitude. I'm going to be Way more grateful today and tomorrow than ever. Probably setting the bar a little too high. What if I took small steps? One more thank you and mean it. Write it down. There's something about writing it that makes a difference for us and other people. Notice that? What if I said, Jesus loves me. I want to be with Jesus one day. How can I not express the answer? All I really can do is say, thank you. If we can assist you this morning to help you, to pray for you, if you'd like to become one with Jesus today, won't you let us know? So stand together and sing.